My Hero Academia, Chapter 247, Status Report. So this is a really short chapter, but it was still pretty interesting. We got a whole bunch of exposition on Izuku's current level of power. I'm going to be going into that, of course, but we also got some character development, and at least projected character development, between the four in the spotlight. So let's get into it. So Endeavor has begun training the big three because he more or less has to, because they need to come prepared for what is going to happen in 4 months. And I do think that they're going to be getting buffs in this arc, but it's more so them becoming more capable, as I'm going to get into that because of the 3 fundamentals that Endeavor talks about in this chapter. But then he asks Izuku specifically, like, what's up with this quirk? How does he want to improve it? What does he want to get out of this training, and how can Endeavor help him? And then he shows him where he's at with the Black Whip quirk. And we saw a glimpse of this a few chapters back. Like, all he's really able to do is spit out, like, just a little bit. A small fraction of what we originally saw him, like, pulling off in the joint training arc. And that's because, you know, he can only do so much. This is essentially what he says the minimum is. Anything more than that, and it's just going to, like, overflow and go wild and whatnot. So then he goes on to explain what, like, his current level of power is. So he says that he can currently use 10 to 15% of One For All full cowling, basically, without being, like, extraneous on his body, without him damaging himself. And then he can go to, like, 20%, as we've seen before, but that's pushing it. That's where the pain starts to come in. And that's the territory that he needs to go into with his Air Force ability. I don't think he clarified that before, back in the Gentle arc. I could be wrong, but I think this might be the first time that he's specifically quantifying how powerful the Air Force is, or the power required to pull off that technique. Like, 10 to 15 is not going to do it. It needs to be at least 20. But then, as I said, and as he says, it goes into pain territory. He's not hurting himself. He's not injuring himself, but the pain is hindering his mobility in battle. So then he says what he essentially wants, and what he's likely going to gain by the end of this arc, is using the Air Force in junction with the Black Whip. And that's awesome. Just the possibilities and thinking of what this could be. It's essentially like shooting like an Indiana Jones type thing, but even more powerful than that, obviously. But it's going to be like the force of a 20% Air Force, which is just, I guess you could just consider it Air Force, in conjunction with the Black Whip. So he's shooting like this thing at you. Instead of just wind, he's shooting the Black Whip at you. That's like lethal, essentially, but I'm sure it won't be when he does it to specific villains and whatnot. But also he can use it for like a utility sense, which is essentially putting Sero to shame, which we all kind of speculated when we initially saw this develop in him. But then Izuku says another thing, which is very interesting. He says, I've recently been practicing a technique in which I momentarily raise my body's maximum limits. So as far as I know, I don't think he has really established what this is yet. I don't think we've really seen him do this yet, since he says recently. So does this mean that we're getting like the canon 30%? And I say the canon because we saw him use that obviously in the movie with the assistance of Melissa's little cast hand thing that she gave him, but it broke. And obviously he wasn't going to bring that over into the actual series. So maybe he can use 30% now. And maybe not, like, hurt himself. It's going to go into pain territory, but maybe it's 30, maybe it's 35, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's, you know, something that's going to be revealed, obviously, because Izuku has definitely improved. I mean, there has been some time since the joint training arc, and he just doesn't stay idle. We know that he's always improving along with the rest of them. So he's going to have, like, another thing to reveal in this arc, as well as improving upon and developing his Air Force Black Whip technique. But another interesting little development here. So while Izuku is dropping this massive exposition bomb, like when I turned to this page, it was a little intimidating seeing these paragraphs just taking up this whole entire like page. But Endeavor surprisingly is receptive to this. This usually turns people away instantly. Everybody's like just bothered by this. It's annoying. Like not even All Might enjoyed this quality of Izuku, but Endeavor is like fine with it. He kind of like likes it in a way because this is what Endeavor's about. We've seen that he's very deductive. He's very perceptive to things. Like he friggin' figured out Hawk's crazy secret message very quickly. So this is essentially in Endeavor's wheelhouse here because, you know, we've even seen like other people in this chapter getting pissed at Izuku for it. But as soon as Izuku's done, Endeavor's just right back at him. So it's like, oh, so in other words, you want to learn to micromanage your power output while in battle. And that's awesome. I think this might be like the blossoming of Izuku and Endeavor's unlikely friendship. He's also drawing some parallels to Izuku here. He's like, you've got quite the burdensome quirk there. It seems like you're in the same boat as us being him and Shoto, of course, but it's like they want to use their full power, but it's difficult because they're going to wind up hurting themselves. As we've seen with Endeavor, he overheats if he uses too much, and that his power is difficult to master, and it's difficult to maintain. Obviously, it's not just like something that he was just a natural with, like All Might, and that's why he's a much better teacher than All Might, because it seems like he needed more time and more training to master his own quirk, as where All Might is just a freak of nature. He's just a specimen. It just came naturally to him. Even though he wasn't born with the quirk, he's just a freak. He's like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan can't really teach you how to be Michael Jordan, just like how All Might can't teach you to be All Might. And speaking of All Might, Endeavor says something very interesting after this. He says, if we're just talking about power, his quirk rivals that of All Might's. And I think this might be the beginning of Endeavor connecting the dots between Izuku and All Might here. I think he might eventually figure out what's going on with All for One, or at least just that All Might gave his quirk to Izuku. Because we've already established that he has some crazy detective skills. If he was able to figure out the secret message that Hawks gave him with the Liberation Manifesto, I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that throughout this arc, he's going to figure out things. Especially the more time that he spends with Izuku, because I'm sure they're going to bond more after this point. He's going to see more about his quirk, and he's probably going to figure things out. And I'm not going to equate this to Bakugo, because Bakugo had way more information than Endeavor, way more context, and he was way closer to that whole situation. But still, I do think Endeavor is going to figure that out in this arc. Speaking of Bakugo, Endeavor's also relating to Bakugo there, because he's seeing oh, I'm kind of like him, when I was young, or maybe even currently, or maybe even before I had my redemption arc. I'm kind of like Bakugo here. And as where Bakugo wants to figure out where he's lacking, because he is so capable, but he is missing some things. The same thing with Endeavor. They're both super capable. They're both really great at essentially doing what they're best at, but they do lack other qualities that they want to improve in. As where Bakugo misses the rescuing and the evacuation aspects of the three fundamentals that Endeavor's talking about. As where Endeavor wants to be just a better person. He wants to be a better father. As where he's already a great hero. So that's where he's drawing the parallels with Bakugo. But then when we go into Shoto here, Shoto, he wants Shoto to still take after him. He obviously has that little comical moment where he's like, you're talking about you want to learn my flash fire, right? But then he's seeing the tables have essentially turned here, right? Because he was only about using Shoto to become his successor, to become the future number one, to overtake All Might. But now Shoto's saying that he's going to use him. He's only using him because he's the number one. He wants to learn from him. Not because he's his father, not because they have similar quirks, but just because of his status. But as for the three fundamentals, rescue, evacuation, and suppression, I think each of these fundamentals represent the big three here. We can equate rescuing to Izuku, that's probably his strong point. We can equate evacuation to Shoto, that's probably his. And as for suppression, that's probably Bakugo's. But it's not them just honing these and becoming the master of them. This whole thing that they're doing here is so that they're proficient in all of them. They need these in order to ascend to the next level and become true heroes and not just one-dimensional that they kind of are right now. But that's pretty much it for the chapter. Like I said, short one, short review. But let me know what you think about all of this. Where do you think things are headed? Do you think Endeavor's going to figure out the connection between Izuku and All Might? If you like the review, guys, please give it a like. I also have a Patreon that gives you access to a weekly Q&A, and if you haven't already, please subscribe as well. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.